Welcome, folks, to The Twist News. I'm Erika Gray.
And I'm Don Pravda. Welcome.
And we love talking about our president because he's such a dinosaur when it comes to foreign policy. And what does he do? But makes a statement to Netanyahu and lets him know that he supports Israel and the two-state solution.
Well, I'm glad he's a friend of Israel, and he's apparently a friend of Prime Minister Netanyahu. However, the two-state solution is not practical. Prime Minister Netanyahu will not agree to it, nor will his new government, which is a major right-wing government and the most right-wing government in the history of Israel. They will not accept President Biden's support of a two-state solution.
When are they going to let this two-state solution go? It's been about how many years? I know that the initiatives have spanned over 40, but the idea of this two-state spans many, many more. I think it's like a total of 90 years. Like, when are they going to get that there is no solution but a one-state solution? I mean, what is wrong with a one-state solution and the Palestinians living within the state of Israel as citizens? I mean, why this two-state nonsense, which isn't even legal according to international law? It doesn't even recognize Israel's sovereignty as a nation.
That's the problem. Israel is not recognized by any Arab country. However, on a positive note to the Abraham Accords, there's a lot of friendship with Israel now. It's not enmity. It's friendship, it's peace, and there shall be more in the future.
Yeah, but this whole two-state solution, if you're listening to this, you've got to do something about this two-state nonsense. That's Biden being a dinosaur, really being a dinosaur. He's not up with the times. He's not even paid attention to many of the facts. There is no such thing as a two-state solution. That's not what the Palestinians really want. They won't even recognize Israel. It's just a smokescreen for another agenda. But that's another story. But the main thing is that a two-state solution is against the mandate, the League of Nations mandate that established Israel as a nation. It's totally disregarding Israeli sovereignty, the fact that Israel has decision-making power over its nation. I mean, how did this get all misconstrued, Don? Like, what happened here?
What happened is that publicity, public relations, attitudes towards Israel have changed over the years. And after 1967, there was more of a liberal understanding of the Arab situation, not a realistic one, but support for third world and support for Arab countries was much more sympathetic. However, Israel, which is right in the middle of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and about 300 million Arab countries, rather 300 million people, it can never work because it's just not practical. It's Israel, and it's a sovereign nation, and we have our own history, custom, laws, and we welcome people from all over the world to be in Israel.
Well, none of that. The Palestinians don't even really recognize, they don't even recognize Israel as a nation. They don't want Israel as a nation. And the whole thing of this two-state and side-by-side, I mean, that's never happened in the history of the world, where you have a nation that becomes a nation, but now they need to create a state for the people who were in the land. I mean, we didn't do that with the Indians. We didn't give the Indians their own state. We didn't divide the United States with the Indians.
But I might parry your remarks in that I've been to many American Indian tribes. The American Indian tribes, are having sovereign status in the United States of America. In other words, they have their own nations within the United States. And of course, they have to comply with the police, fire departments, and the local community. But they are sovereign nations. They may be small and the numbers are small, but legally we're trying to work with American Indians, and they're also taking our money at the bingo parlors.
But that's actually a model. That's a model for what could be in Israel and the Palestinians. But you're right. The U.S. still has sovereignty, is still sovereign over those sovereign nations. Those nations still need to comply with U.S. law, although the sovereignty, and you would know more about this, gives them certain rights. But is there any rights that they have that are greater than the rights of the country for which they live, which is the United States?
Well, they have more choices to make, and they're also in the cigarette business, convenience store business, and go a little bit further, they're in the tourism business. They need people to visit them at each tribe to stimulate their economies and create friendship with let's call them the Anglos.
But they're still within the United States of America.
That's right.
The United States isn't divided into two clear states, which would be the United States and then the Indians, but they're given status within, and that sounds like, Don, what you're talking about is a model for Israel and the Palestinians. But this whole two-state dividing Jerusalem, that's a whole nother topic that's just unbelievable. But dividing it in half, creating two separate states, is frankly absurd.
Absolutely. And it's very troublesome. And Israel needs more friends. I believe they're doing very well now in expanding the Dove of Peace. However, when you wake up in the morning in Israel, you're surrounded by a lot of enemies, and life is very serious in Israel.
How come the Palestinians just can't live within Israel as Israel, recognizing Israel, and have their rights within the nation? I don't understand this whole two-state solution, how it got so strong, how many nations are proponents of it, but it's something that doesn't even make geopolitical sense. It just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't even go along with the precedent set by other countries of when they take over a land, when they go into a land. And I just don't see how it can even work. And if they're really sincere, then why don't they just accept the Israel sovereignty and instead have their place in that land like the Indians in the United States? Why this two-state? Why this division? Why what's ours is ours, what's theirs is theirs? They want the land. They don't want to accept that Israel is in it. Well, that's not the way you go about having a two-state solution. If it was viable, if it did make geopolitical sense, but it doesn't.
And let's not forget Gaza and the West Bank. It is a sovereign nation under international law. They are poor places and rather undeveloped, but they do exist, and the Arab communities are surely welcome to live there.
But you have a lot of viewpoints, and some of the viewpoints that you have on this whole issue aren't even genuine viewpoints. It's manipulation and smokescreens for another agenda, for an agenda that really does not want Israel there to begin with, or the Jews there to begin with, does not want any recognition, Israel as the land of the Jews.
And I always recommend people to watch films, watch historical films, or even on cable. There's so much information about the founding of Israel, the miracles that have happened, the remarkable growth of this country. It has industry, intellect, art, culture, books. It's all there for anybody who wants it, and the feeling of being in this holy land.
You have a really good point that despite all the hatred, all the terrorists, all the Middle Eastern countries that want this nation destroyed, despite all of that, the land of Israel is thriving. It's eighth now in the world as far as its economy. It is excelling as a startup nation.
I also want to inform people from around the world. Over the years, I was in fact in Israel for the Hebrew class, which is known as the Ulpan. And virtually every student in the class was from the Christian Orthodox Church. And I got to know a lot of people at that time. And they are protected in Israel. Their theology, their property, the churches, the schools that they're training their ministers in, they are protected. And one after another has told me how much they love Israel.
Wow,
I said to one of the reverends, why don't you study in the founding nation? Why don't you study now in Istanbul, Constantinople? Why would you be in Israel? The answer is it's extremely difficult for Christians who are wearing the garb, the men who have beards and a big cap. The citizens in Turkey are not as tolerant as it used to be. The cursing and the rock throwing, the degradation, that has led to students and ministers to go to Israel. And their area is a very beautiful part of Jerusalem.
I think that's an amazing illustration of how the Palestinians can also live in Israel. And if you think about this, this doesn't make any sense. Demand for an additional state, but why can't they just live there, live under Israeli law, live in peace, have their communities? Why this division? I think Biden is just using this as, I don't even think, he's probably not read any other options because he's so busy spending money and sending money to Ukraine that and probably figuring how much more he can send and spend to protect, let's not talk about it, but deals that his son is in on, that he's not even seeing if there's any other options. I mean, it's just cliche now, two-state solution. I don't even think he knows what he's talking about. I don't even think he fully gives it any thought. It just sounds good. It's a soundbite. Sounds great, makes him sound presidential, but he sounds like a dinosaur. And it doesn't work. And it's old. And it's not with the times. And it's not even respecting, it's not even the nations of the world respecting Israeli sovereignty. And I really have an issue with this, that the nations of the world, these powerful nations, are very manipulative. And they throw out these terms such as sovereignty and democracy, but they manipulate them. And Israel, let's face it, is not treated as a sovereign nation. It's treated as a nation that the others want to manipulate.
I surely agree with that. Many years ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, negotiating peace with the Arabs is a tactic. It's not really a negotiation. It's just propaganda of we've had a meeting, we've had this talk, and nothing has come out of the talks. The Israelis don't want to give in to us. But if there was real diplomatic ability between the two nations, I think we could get to a solution.
The first piece is recognizing Israel. They're recognizing Israel as a nation. And that's not the case. Recognizing Israeli sovereignty, and that's just not what the two-state solution is really all about. It's really exposes the anti-Israel sentiment and the anti-Israel feeling that this nation really does not belong to the Jews, that it really belongs to the Palestinians. So let's carve out half for the Palestinians, because we don't recognize Israel. And then the nations of the world go along with this nonsense when they don't go along with it in the history of the world of any other nation, except now when Israel became a nation and this issue with the Palestinians. Do you know a precedent in world history where a nation now needed to divide it with the inhabitants
They don't divide it. We want peaceful solutions. In fact, what we want is to negotiate with Arab nations, let them come to Israel, and let the Jewish cabinet, the ministers, those who want a diplomatic solution to come together from many of the Arab countries. I think it can work. And we're getting closer to the possibility that can be accomplished.
Well, I think also that nations, someone like Biden is afraid to take that stand of Israeli sovereignty and that Israel's a sovereign nation. It's amazing because it's used for Ukraine. Ukraine is sovereign. Ukraine just can decide if it wants to be in NATO. This should be respected. Russian sovereignty, of course, is not respected. Russia is written off as authoritarian. And so any nation that a democratic nation sees as authoritarian, whatever their logic is just propaganda, and there is no legitimate beefs or issues. So these are contradictions in the Western nations, in the thinking, in what's put out in the media, and this sovereignty is really abused, misused, which we talk about on this channel, and it's especially misused with the nation of Israel. Israeli sovereignty is really not recognized. Let's face it. It's not recognized by the UN.
No.
It's not recognized by many nations or by the leading nations. And it's now currently not being recognized by Biden, who is putting out this vomit, let's call it vomit, of a two-state solution. Why can't the Palestinians recognize Israeli sovereignty and just live in the land?
It's not in their interests. They don't want peace. And Mr. Abbas is a billionaire. He wants to control the situation. He's not the worst leader they've ever had. I think Arafat was the worst. However, how much does he really care about his constituency, or how much does he really care about himself and his son, who have control, who have the power in this group?
Really good point, Don.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. I mean, I know this is an involved issue, and we're going to be having people on to talk about this. We're going to get into this more and more with some experts who are going to come on and share some really great details on the Palestinian issue. And going forward, we believe on this channel that the best interest is a one state, the recognition of Israel and those peoples living within the nation, just as Don described. So in short, we think that Mr. Biden is just trying to sound good publicly, making a cliche statement, and not really looking for any real solutions. And the main issue here is the lack of Palestinian recognition of Israel as a sovereign nation, as now the sovereign is over them, do not want to accept it. And their issues really go further than just their issues of being in the land. It actually goes to their religion. So this ends up being more of a religious issue, and that's just not good politics.
Hallelujah. I hope your Hanukkah and your holidays at this season have been wonderful, and wishing folks out there a happy new year in 2023.
Yes. And be sure, check out our Amazon store, donate to this channel if you believe in what we believe, which check out our trailer channel or our channel trailer, and you can learn what it is we are doing on this channel. And again, check out our Amazon store. Be
Right.
sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more broadcasts.
And thank you very much, and good night.